Todd Henry is known as the arms dealer for the creative revolution. He speaks to and trains many organizations about creativity. Today, I will be reviewing for you The Accidental Creative, which is all about opening your mind to the purposeful way of approaching the creative process. And he shares this process that has worked for him and many others. There are two parts to this book. The first part really dives deep into the pressures and the dynamics of creative work, while the second part actually talks about the practice that can help with the higher levels of creative insight and how the creative rhythm works and how you can use that to your advantage. There is a natural rhythm to the creative process, the peak and the troughs, and many try to keep the peak all the time. But this eventually leads to mediocre or even flat work because you're not allowing yourself to flow through that process. You can't force an idea. With the right process, you can help them come around more often and when you need them. And that is what is important. Working with that create on demand mind frame can cause side effects. And these side effects are known as the assassins of creativity, which include dissonance, fear, and expectation escalation. Dissonance deals with the tensions creatives feel. We need to create amazing ideas, but if what and why aren't lining up, then it is much harder to find the solutions to the problem. This happens when there are uncertain complexities in the way, objectives that are unclear, and the opacity of the creative team isn't transparent enough. There's a lack of clarifications across the project, which won't deliver the great ideas if we are fighting just to understand what and why we are doing what we're doing. Fear holds many back because some are afraid of the failure that might come from taking a risk. Or there's even the recognition and the consequences that come from a success. So, to quote Todd Henry, growth is uncomfortable, but without that discomfort, our capacity doesn't remain the same, it actually shrinks. If we're not growing, we're dying. And we also deal with this expectation escalation. We close off potential once we place these high expectations and comparison on the work that we're doing. This leads to writing off ideas just because we think they won't be good enough, and they even prevent other ideas from ever coming to light. We also hold these expectations due to our past work, our peers, and our competition, and even our heroes that we look up to. So, how do we combat these side effects? How do we develop a process that works with creative rhythm to bring about the most creative insight and brilliant ideas? Todd Henry uses practices in 5 key areas in life to help gain creative traction: focus, relationships, energy, stimuli, and hours, which comes out to be what he calls fresh. Focus is needed for new ideas to emerge, but as creatives, we are pulled around by different priorities, which can leave us feeling overwhelmed as the unfinished work piles on. There are usually 3 modes of focus people use. We have drifters that work in fragments and have a hard time deciding what to do next. There is production, but it is scattered. Drivers dive in hard and are structured. It is driven by checking off lists, though, which can lead to overlooking opportunities because of the narrow, microscopic focus that they have. Now, when we look at developers, they have a sense of purpose behind their objectives and approach each task as an opportunity for new ideas and connections to develop. Now, becoming a developer requires you to define the problem, refine your priorities, and cluster the work to create less distractions throughout your process. You can use questions to help define your problem that help give your more clear objectives on what you're doing. And what stood out the most to me was Todd Henry's use of the big three to refine his priorities. His process helps to focus on what needs your attention and what you can let go of for now. This is not a to-do list, though. You list all your projects in your life, but then you decide what needs some kind of conceptual breakthrough and choose the three that are the most important within that list. And then you can learn to cluster your work. And if you bring things that are related together, it can create less distraction throughout your day when you're switching from things that you're working on. Connections and relationships are incredibly important in creativity. They're about sharing life experiences, and this gives us a chance to see from new perspectives. Now, quite a few creatives are introverts, which can limit relationships or make them feel like keeping up on those connections are like an obligation that takes away from our work, instead of realizing how important relationships actually are and how they help us develop ideas. As Todd Henry says, the creative process is an inherently generous act. A great way to enrich your relationships is to start. Even if you have time, you have to have energy. It's important to plan weekly, monthly, and quarterly. This helps you see what you have energy for and what you can add and what you need to say no to if new commitments come up. It is so important to prune what is unnecessary and what is taking up your time. This part may be hard, but removing these things in our schedule that aren't helping us move forward gives room for new opportunities to arise. So when you're planning your life, you need to account for every commitment you make in every area. Stimuli in our lives should challenge us and have some kind of relevance to the problems we are trying to find solutions to, and should be diverse. What goes in must come out. So we need to pay attention to what we are engaging our attention with every day. Todd suggests even keeping notes that you can review regularly. And the reviewing part of the notes is the key part in taking notes, though. A great way to stay ahead of the creative insight you'll need for the future is to create a plan for your stimuli. Think about the creative process and your projects you're working on and the ones coming up, and use the stimuli in your life to your advantage. This doesn't mean don't have fun. Play is also important for growth and development. It's about being purposeful, though, and mindful of how you're using your time. So take time to help others when you can, or even attend an event you wouldn't normally. Is really a great way to take you out of your normal zone that you're always in and challenge your thinking. Time is one of the biggest pressures most creatives feel. We are constantly thinking about time, and we try to cram as much work as we can into every moment. But are we being as effective as possible? 1 hour effectively spent is better than spending 5 hours on frantic activity. We need to think of time as a portfolio instead of a slot machine. Slamming through work constantly may give you a bit of a return, but it won't be your best work. You must have an investment mindset instead. Todd Henry also suggests giving yourself time just to generate ideas. Write all the ideas down, even if they aren't relevant to the problems you're trying to solve, too. It might come in handy later. Giving yourself time to just create for fun and use your hands, it helps bring back the passion for the on-demand creative work that we do. And that's that unnecessary creating, which also invites new sources of insight that we can take to our work, because during this time we find ourselves in a flow and deeply engaged in the process. And then it's time to put it all together by planning checkpoints to make sure that you're staying on course. You want to stop and reflect over each category and clarify your planning. He recommends doing this weekly. There are no shortcuts in the creative process, but with intention, choice, and discipline, you can bring more purpose to your life. You are trading that immediate gratification for future insight. I would highly recommend this book for all creatives. And even outside of the creative world, I feel like there is some benefit to this book. Ted Henry provides you with a practical way to support your creative process and sustain this creative potential while helping you understand how the creative rhythm works. If you want the maximum output, you have to live with purpose and be mindful of how you are using your potential. Brilliant ideas are waiting for you if you're willing to dive deep and give its process a chance.